Okay, so before I get into this one, just a little call out for two of my subscribers. Sloth Jolly, you gave me the idea about the Canada Truckers protest video, so thank you. Um, I honestly couldn't remember who it was at the time, so that's why I didn't name you. But thanks for that. Better Days, you have suggested making a video about the online dating thing. I did before, but probably is time for an update on that. As a general approach, I don't always name subscribers, but maybe I will do from now on. If you guys, girls, give me some interesting information, well, some ideas, I might mention you in videos. So yeah, Sloth Jolly, better days. Thank you. Um, on that dating video. I'll try and do it soon, maybe tomorrow, but I generally don't do requests because I need to be in the mood for something to do it. But that is one that I've been intending to make anyway. Okay, so the latest from Ukraine is that the city of Mariupol is it's a devastating situation there. Some reports are suggesting over 1,000 civilians have died in that one city. Um, I think the whole world was disgusted by the bombing of the hospital and the maternity ward. I mean, that's beyond depraved. How the Russians can claim any military significance whatsoever, the best they can say is it was a mistake, but they haven't even said that, so it's utterly depraved. They'll probably try and spin that it's fake. Um, I mean, I've seen people online even try to say that this war isn't even happening because they're so blinded by Russian propaganda that they're prepared to actually stoop to that level. It's a bit like those people in the States who claim that survivors of mass shootings are crisis actors, except this is a much bigger scale. It's honestly when people get to that level of thinking, I can't even engage with them. I don't even know how to engage with them, to be quite honest, because they're so off the charts. Um, Incidentally, I just want to share a quick anecdote um, about someone that I know, and I'll just make this brief because it's not the main point of the video, but it's related to this. Um, for those of you who've been on my channel for a long time now, you may recall that in 2014 I made videos defending a Thai woman who goes by various names. Chatwadi Rose Amonpa is one of those names. But basically, she more or less got refuge in the UK because she was being violently threatened by Thai royalists. If you know anything about Thailand, they have very rigid lèse majesté laws, which basically makes it illegal to criticize the monarchy. And in Thailand, the monarchy is intense. It's basically quasi-religious. The current king isn't as popular as his father, but when King Bhumibol was on the throne, it was really intense. I know that because I personally dealt with some of these Thai royalists. I mean, they're quite extreme in the way they go about hounding and harassing anyone who thinks differently. I'm not a Republican, but I'm, goes without saying, not comfortable with that level of sycophantic royalism. Um, Thankfully, such laws have long been discarded in this country. But anyway, I defended her at the time, her right to free speech. But she was even being harassed by Thais in London, Thai royalists. Some of them later got charged with harassment. So I made a video defending her, and we sort of got connected. I never met her in person, but we got connected. She shared videos I made, and they're among some of my most viewed videos. I think they have one of them has 14,000 views, another 20,000. So they are among my most viewed videos. Now I stand by everything I said there, and I stand by the principle in which I said it. I was defending her right to free speech. Unfortunately, I've just disconnected from her because in recent months, I don't know when this began, but she's really started going down a rabbit hole. Um, whereas when I first knew her, it was all about Thai politics. In recent months, she's really been going down this conspiracy theorist rabbit hole pushing nonsense about vaccines, and it's very disconcerting. That was bad enough, but more recently, like in the last few days, she's come out with posts. They're in Thai, but I've translated them, that are basically pro-Putin and suggesting the whole thing is some sort of CIA plot. And I was so disgusted by that that I no longer wanted to be connected with her, and I told her so. And I also said that, this country gave you refuge, and this is how you repay us, by basically propping up an enemy of the whole of Europe. And I do believe that Vladimir Putin is an enemy of the whole of Europe. Um, so I was disgusted by that. But my point is, people can change. But not to digress, on the issue of Ukraine, the latest thing is this fear that Russia could actually use chemical weapons. Now, of course, with something as grave as this, we need to be careful what information is around and what we're listening to. And right now, it is all speculation. But there are fears that Russia could stage a false flag attack. That is, they could commit a chemical attack, but imply that it was the Ukrainians, because there's apparently chemical plants in Ukraine. Um, I wouldn't put anything past the Kremlin at this point. I really wouldn't. I mean, if they could bomb a maternity hospital, what's to stop them using chemical weapons? After all, they propped up the Assad regime in Syria, which almost certainly did. At the time, military analysts, weapons analysts, people looking at those chemical attacks in the Syria war, in Ghouta and Deira, um, concluded that in all likelihood it was the Syrian government. Now, there was some that were saying it was ISIS or it was other factions fighting the Syrian government. The truth is, we may never know 100%. But given the utter depravity which Assad regime had shown, its ruthless campaign of barrel bombing civilians, I think that in all probability it was the regime that done that, backed by Russia. And for years, the fact of the matter is, Russian state media propped up the Assad regime. It passed this narrative that Assad was just an embattled president fighting terrorists. This is one of the most grotesque things about the Syria war, was the fact that for years, that was the narrative that was spun. And therefore, one of the most common things that was thrown out there was NATO created ISIS. Um, or the West created ISIS. There was very little actual, basis for this claim. As a state policy, the West created ISIS. Now, what happened in Syria was in late 2011, because I followed the war from the start. In late 2011, as with much of the Arab world, there were protests against corruption, protests against rising fuel costs, against unemployment, and against police brutality, and a range of other things that average Syrians were very unhappy about. The Assad regime's response, like most dictatorships, was brute force. This then spiraled into a violent conflict that, as we know, became the Syria war. Now, groups like ISIS capitalized on a quagmire situation because what had happened was in 2013, when the UN General Assembly voted to condemn Assad's actions, Russia and China, or rather the Security Council, I should say, Russia and China voted against sanctions against the Assad regime. Um, so basically, Russia and China propped that regime up. This therefore enabled Islamist groups like ISIS to take advantage of the situation. They weren't in Syria in a big way, if at all, in 2011 when the war broke out. They started becoming a significant presence probably around late 2013, 2014. So this argument, the West created ISIS, is a real distortion. I remember Putin saying that the West was backing Islamists who were, cutting people's hands off and doing barbaric things. Now, the Russians have been proven to be liars. They lied about the Ukraine. They said that the Ukraine situation, I should say, I don't mean the Ukraine as in that derogatory way the Russians call it as a region. They said they were on military exercises and then we saw full blown invasion. Totalitarian regimes lie. That is the nature of totalitarian regimes. Russian state and media has been lying about Syria for years, and unfortunately, many people have bought into it. Here's the ironic thing. NATO took action against both Assad and ISIS. So how could we be propping up ISIS if we took military action against them? That makes no sense. Makes no sense whatsoever. Why am I talking about Syria? It's relevant to this because God forbid this actually happens and Russia does use chemical weapons. We will see we'll see fierce condemnation from the West, but we will also see people promoting this narrative that it was actually the Ukrainians that done it to justify a war um, against Russia. And you will see the far left and the far right uniting to sow the Russian narrative. And they will come out of the woodwork to spread these lies. And I think they're beyond despicable. I really do. But honestly, I wouldn't put it past the Kremlin. I hope to God it doesn't happen because it would be depraved. What's already happened is depraved. But anyway, the other major thing I want to talk about in this video, again, it relates to Ukraine and it relates to this crisis. And it's about Russia itself. Um, One notable thing about all of this is the number of brave, ordinary Russians that have spoken out and some prominent Russians. Now, they may still be a minority. It may be true that the majority of Russians are still taken in by Putin's lies, because, of course, the Putin regime controls the media there. But the fact of the matter is, in whatever way it's happening, information is trickling through. I know Anonymous um, hacked Russian airwaves and they broadcast images of the Ukraine war so people could see what was really happening. Russian mothers have been openly demanding the truth because their sons are being killed. In fact, this was a major driving force in the Chechen wars. Russian mothers, complained to the Yeltsin administration and the Putin administration about what was happening to their sons. So that's quite a significant constituency. Um, I mean, there was a video the other day of people in the city of Perm who'd been arrested, and as they were awaiting interrogation, they were explaining to each other the reasons for doing so. So this is very important to remember in the West. There are many, many ordinary Russians who are speaking out, but they are facing very real risks for doing so. Beatings by the police. Putin's brought in a new law: 15 years in jail. I guess they're terming it treason. So we shouldn't underplay the courage that these ordinary Russians are showing to do the right thing. Therefore, I think it's a big mistake to conflate opposition to the Putin regime with this generic opposition to Russia. Some examples of this is the Cardiff Symphony Orchestra has cancelled its night of Tchaikovsky performances. They were going to have a Tchaikovsky theme night. That's been cancelled. Apparently, a Russian musician in Montreal has had his visa revoked. Now, these people are not Putin insiders. They're not spies. They're not generals. They're just ordinary Russians. Um, so I do think that we need to be careful not to get into Russophobia because this is one of the things that Putin has been putting out, that the West is Russophobic. We shouldn't give him that on a plate. We shouldn't be Russophobic. We shouldn't tarnish ordinary Russians. So I think we need to be careful not to have this sort of generic backlash against everything Russian. I think that would be a mistake. Russian products, maybe there is a cause to make or an argument to make about boycotting Russian products, but starting to stigmatize ordinary Russian people or even Russian public figures who have forcefully condemned Putin for stigmatizing them for no other reason than their nationality. I think it's wrong. It's wrong morally, but it will also play into Putin's hands because then he will say, "Oh, this just proves the West is anti-Russia." So it's a bit stupid, and I also think it's unfair. And the same people who are doing it, some of them are from the political left. Now, if China, for example, invaded Taiwan, China's already done horrendous things. The cultural genocide in Xinjiang is still ongoing. If the West just had this generic boycott of everything Chinese, then the political left will be talking about xenophobia and anti-Asian racism. Well, why is it any different with Russians? Why is it okay to stigmatize Russians, but not Chinese people. What's the difference? I mean, the ordinary Chinese people have no say over the government. And I would say actually the level of dissent in China is significantly less than it is in Russia. There's more Chinese people willing to be apologists for Xi Jinping and the CCP than there are ordinary Russians, I would say, willing to be apologists for Putin. So, there shouldn't be double standards in that. Um, I certainly think certain symbolic things can be done. This idea about renaming streets around the Russian embassy in London is a good move. I think that even something like renaming Chicken Kievs the Chicken Kievs, it might sound trivial, but it's the sort of thing that can send out a message. But at the same time, I think we have to be careful not to get into Russophobia. Um, and these big companies, whether it be orchestras or cultural programs or whatever it is, just banning everything Russian. All that's going to do is polarize those Russians who have spoken out against Putin, because it's going to put them in a position whereby they're being stigmatized for their nationality, but they're trying to do the right thing. They're speaking out against Putin. So I think it's wrong, and yeah, I just think that's wrong. Right, let me know your thoughts on these things. The thing about chemical warfare, it's horrendous. We've been talking about nuclear war recently, or that's been part of this whole debate. It's almost unthinkable. But chemical warfare is bad enough. It's depraved. I mean, the cruelty of it, the intense pain that it causes, the deformities, it's barbaric, absolutely barbaric. And if Russia does that, um, what will be the red line? I think we need to impose a no-fly zone, at least over perhaps Western Ukraine. Um, But the other thing about no fly zone is that actually, and this is a valid argument, most of the assaults on civilians in Ukraine haven't come from the air, they've come from the Russian artillery. It's difficult to know what the red line is. I mean, Russia's invaded a sovereign country. The West has responded with severe sanctions, which will hurt the Russian economy. And Russia militarily is making a real mess of this. So, it hasn't been the sweeping advance that Putin thought it would be. But at some point, what's to stop Russia going for the Baltic states or Moldova? What is the red line? That is the big question for Joe Biden and the West. I think they need to be clear about that, at least among ourselves. Maybe not publicize it, because then Putin has the upper hand. He can just choose when he makes his moves. I don't know. But I'm against Russophobia, and I just think it would be a mistake.